Each year in the United States, thousands of major crimes go unsolved. When the case has gone cold and police have nowhere to turn, they seek assistance from the public. This is a program dedicated to solving these cases. This is Crime Stoppers Case Files.
Like most urban areas, Chicago and its surrounding cities have had a number of unsolved crimes. Crimes that the public may be able to help solve. I'm Lisa Guillen, and this is Crime Stoppers Case Files. The purpose of this program is to shine a light on unsolved cases in an effort to get you, the public, involved. If you know anything about any of the cases you see today, call Cook County Crime Stoppers at 1-800-535-STOP. You can remain anonymous and be eligible for a cash reward. Now, let's get right to work.
On October 19, 2008, officers were dispatched to the 3900 block of Hemlock Street in East Chicago. When they arrived, they found 23-year-old Javier Solis Jr. lying on the ground, unresponsive. Here's the story.
I was very young when I had Javier, and having him at 17 was really what motivated me to have hope in my life, you know, having him there.
It was a hard time for her. As happy as she was, it was hard. The father was in his life for a little bit, like kind of back and forth, but she did mostly everything. And we would take Javo with us, and he was like a little celebrity. We'd put him in the stroller and take him walking. And while she worked a lot when the boys were young. He was always a good kid. Javier was a good kid. He was a good brother, a good cousin to my kids.
Javier is very lovable kid, always has been. Even as he got into his early teenage years, he still called me mommy, which was funny because all of my boys are over 6 feet tall.
Watching them grow up was so fun. Like, they were entertainment. We'd all get together and let them entertain us. And then getting older, they started to sprout. Like, they're like 6'2", 6'3", all over 6 feet tall. He started getting his little facial hair, and we just like tease him about his boys and girls.
They were typical older brothers. They looked out for me and beat me up a lot. My mom would yell at them all the time. If my brother ever thought somebody was picking on me, he would say something to them. I loved them a lot.
When my son was living with his father, the weekend before, he called me and he said, "Mom, can you come pick me up?" You know, so I went and picked him up. He spent 4 days with us at the house, and we barbecued and we just went to the movies, and he was, you know, talking about his future and getting married and how many kids he was gonna have. He was gonna have 5, and he was gonna name them all Javo, and I kind of said, "What are you gonna name the girls?" He said, "Well, Javita, Javasita," and he went on, and we thought that was funny. But he said, "Well, I'm gonna go back to my dad's and I'll be home."
On October 19th, 2008, officers were called to the area of 3925 Hemlock Avenue in reference to a shooting. On October 19th, 2008, officers were called to the 3900 block of Hemlock in reference to a shooting. The responding officer arrived that afternoon around 4 p.m. What he saw when he got there was a male Latin laying on his back, who was later identified as Javier Solis Jr. There were 2 other guys that were actually with him when he was shot. The house that they were at was the home of Mike Rojas, and there was another young man there by the name of Claudio Martinez Jr. Those 3 subjects were at Mike's house that day, helping his mother move some furniture around. The mom was warming up some food for the 3 guys. So they decided to go to the rear of the house. Mike gets up, to go check to see if the food is ready. And upon getting ready to leave, they hear some gunshots. Well, at this time, Mike jumps into his house and closes the door. Javier Solis jumps up and runs westbound through a gangway. Claudio then follows Javier through the same gangway as these gunshots are going along. Well, as they get to the end of the gangway, Javier Solis collapses. At that same point in time, there was a young lady who was walking and go northbound on Hemlock from 140th. So as she's coming down the street, she hears gunshots, and she finally sees a guy that runs in front of her. But she does see that he's a male Latin, bright skin, and he has a goatee, and he has a round face. Well, she kind of figures that she knows this guy, but he fired one more shot, and then he ran westbound through between two residences. At that time, she heard some people cry for help, so she went to go see what was going on. And as she got closer to the body, she found out the person that was lying there shot was her cousin, Javier Solis Jr. A male black subject came up to this female named Jessica Solis and started administering CPR to try to help save his life. So they stayed until the medics and the police got there. The body was later transferred to the hospital, where he later died on arrival. There was an elderly man who was in the alley right after the shooting. And this elderly man says he sees a kind of a stout kid wearing a black hoodie and blue jeans. He has a goatee, facial hair, and has a round face, exiting between the houses. Well, a green Buick, a dark green Buick with another guy, and him along with some other individuals, they drove off eastbound from the crime scene. Well, that car was later found to be a gang member by the name of Miggs, Miguel Colon. Through information later, it was found that Miggs, he was the actual driver at the scene of the crime.
I remember I was playing video games, and the phone rang. And it was my dad. He said, let me talk to your mom. I said, she's in the shower. He said, tell her it's important.
So I get on the phone, I'm like, hello, and he says, Javo has been shot. You have to get to the hospital.
I remember she busted out of the bathroom. She said, your brother's been shot. He's at the hospital. Pray for him. And she ran out the door.
I get out the car, and Julius and my husband were standing outside of the emergency room. And I said, where is my son? And nobody answered. Nobody answered me.
Javier Solis and his boys, they were gang members at the time. None of the guys that were at the scene, including Claudio and Mike, they were at the hospital, along with other friends or gang members that was in Javier's little clique. No one wanted to speak about the incident. They didn't want to help the police at all.
And then the doctor comes in with a pastor. So he sat me down and he started to explain about Javier. And I looked over to my husband and I said, I can do a lot of things, but this I can't do. And he held my hand and I thought, okay, all I have to do is hold my son. That's all I have to do is hold him. I have to hold him. If I hold him, all the love that I hold in my heart for him will transfer over and he'll be okay. He'll live, he'll breathe. His heart will start beating. And I said, where is he? I have to hold him. Where is he? And the police officer said, he's in this room and we have him here, but you can't touch him. We have to process evidence. And he went on explaining, I heard nothing. All I knew is I could not hold my son. I'm trying to process this thing. So they take me to see my son bound, literally bound. So I wouldn't touch him, so I wouldn't hold him. And I went in there alone. And when I saw him laying there, he looked like he was sleeping. And all I kept thinking is if God would allow me to give him my breath, to give him my heartbeat. But I was helpless.
I went to Jessica Solis's aunt's house on Drummond Street. She told me that she recognized who the person was. And she said the guy looks like his name was Rolando Leal, who at one time was a friend of Javier Solis, but those two were having conflict at the time due to Rolando trying to be initiated into another gang. She came down the next day. She went through a photo lineup and she picked out Rolando Leal. At that time, APP was put out for Rolando Leal to be picked up for questioning. He actually came in himself, but he came in with a lawyer. And he gave an alibi that he was at a birthday party in Hobart, Indiana. And upon talking with Jessica later, she kind of recanted a little bit and stated that she really didn't know if it was Rolando. So at that point in time, the investigation went on for months and finally went into cold status because we just didn't have enough to bring Rolando in for the case.
And they escorted me out of the hospital, and I remember standing outside and I was looking around. Everything went dim. Everything was a shade darker. It's like the grass was not as green or the sky wasn't as blue. And I watched the cars go by and I thought, okay, everybody has to stop because Howell has not moved forward yet, so we have to hit pause. And the world was not right anymore.
On October 19th, 2008, my victim, Javier Solis Jr., was fatally shot in front of Hemlock Avenue by another male Latin. This turned out to be a gang shooting.
With all the different things that had happened in his life, all the tragic things, all the mistakes he had made, he was just Havo to us. He was just Havo, and I never got to tell him that I had been praying for him, that I still thought about him, that I loved him, that in my eyes he was always a good kid. He was just a good kid. Thinking about my nephew that he's so close with, thinking if he was always in Havo's shadow, if he was always following his big brother, who is he now without having a shadow to follow?
How do I live another week? How do I live another year without seeing my son, without him calling my name, without him being there to ask me if I could make him the egg with the ball in it, or him just sitting down watching TV. You know, I close my eyes and I literally know what my son's toes look like, his knuckles, his earlobes, the birthmark he has on the back of his leg, the scar he has on his hand, the way he wiggles his ears, his smile, the way he stands, the way he eats. And I literally can smell him. If I just close my eyes and be still long enough, he's still with me.
To kind of hear the rumors is hard. To run into people is hard. It's hard to be in East Chicago, but for someone to be charged, prosecuted, and to do time for the murder would bring, I don't want to say peace, because it's hard to find that no matter what happens, no matter what the outcome is.
For Havo, it would mean justice. For us as a family, it would bring peace. And nothing in this life is going to replace the void that we have. But at least there can be closure. All I ask is for you to put yourself in my shoes. And how would they feel knowing that their child was not able to experience all that life had for them? And to just have compassion with me, with my son, with our family, and to do the right thing. If for nothing else, to do the right thing.
If you have any information about anything that can help, it would be greatly appreciated, and it would just help a lot.
From the descriptions that was given by the neighbors and by the people involved, the suspect is a heavier male Latin, between 5'6" and 5'10". He has facial hair, he's lighter complected, and at the time he was wearing a black hoodie with blue jeans. The vehicle that was described was a older model, maybe like a forest green or a darker green Buick LeSabre that drove off from the scene. If anyone does have any information in reference to the Javier Solis homicide, I can be reached Detective Maurice Phillips at the East Chicago Police Department, area code 219-391-8306. Or you can call Crime Stoppers hotline, where you will always be anonymous.
This family is missing a son and a brother. They deserve answers. His killer may think he's gotten away with his crime. Our job is to make sure he doesn't. If you have any information that can help East Chicago Police, call Crime Stoppers right now. You don't have to say your name, and you can be eligible for a cash reward.
During the midnight hour of January 29, 1994, officers were dispatched to the 3900 block of Butternut Street in East Chicago after getting reports of shots fired. When they arrived, they found two victims lying on the street. Both had been shot, and both just 14 years old. Here's the story.
On January 29, 1994, at about 12:53 a.m., officers responded to the area of 3902 Butternut in reference to shots fired, and upon arrival they found two victims on the sidewalk with an apparent gun wound to the neck and one with a wound to his left leg. Max Weathersby and Thomas Weathersby were both 14-year-olds at the time. They were coming home from a friend's house, walking home that night, which was only a couple blocks away from their house when this tragic incident occurred. They started to walk home, and it was a little bit after midnight. When they were walking east on 139th Street, they were walking in the middle of the street due to the snow and the ice on the sidewalks. As they were walking, they heard a vehicle approaching them, and they heard this vehicle because of the slush that the vehicle was making. When the vehicle came up to them, Max noticed 4 to 5 male black individuals in this beige Chevy Cavalier 4-door is what he described it as, pull up next to them, and then shots coming from the passenger side windows of that vehicle. He stated that he felt that he was shot in the leg and ducked for cover and didn't know what happened to his cousin Thomas at the time. Officers on scene were able to locate another individual who was a witness a block away, and he was parked in his vehicle, witnessed Thomas and Max walking past his vehicle in the middle of the street. And minutes later, he observed this same 4-door beige Chevy Cavalier occupied by 4 to 5 male black individuals that passed his vehicle, approached Thomas and Max, and observed and heard gunfire coming from the side passenger windows. He had witnessed that vehicle travel east on 139th toward the Guthrie Street area and then fled to parts unknown. The victims, Thomas Weathersby and Max Weathersby, were transported immediately to the St. Catherine's emergency room where they received treatment. Several hours later, after treatment, Thomas Weathersby passed away, wasn't responding to his treatment. You know, being that these children were 14 years old and just walking home and, you know, not getting into any trouble, here's this vehicle that comes up and maybe mistakes them for their identity or whatnot, and just shoots at random, not knowing who these kids were. And this has affected the parents of both children, especially the Thomas Weathersby family, who lost their 14-year-old son, the grandmother who lost her grandchild at the time, and were very heartbroken that a senseless life was taken from them due to this act. Since it's been 19 years in this case, we have yet to receive any information or new information about any suspects that may be involved in this case. We're hoping with the help of Crime Stoppers that somebody viewing this show remembers something from that night, maybe was a passenger inside that vehicle and now wants to speak in reference to what took place during that shooting, to come forward and give us a call and provide us with that information. Our number here is area code 391-8400, or you can contact Crime Stoppers and remain anonymous there.
Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Crime Stoppers Case Files. Keep up with the show by liking us on Facebook. Remember, we are here every week with more crimes and more families needing answers. These are your neighbors, this is your community, and you can make a difference.